Hey everyone, it is Eric Machnes, Director of Operations at Red Clover, a strategic HR and change management consulting firm located in Parsippany, New Jersey.
And I'm Jen Lestrange, the CEO. I don't have to say anything else.
No, yeah. This is our coffee chat, which is a little longer discussion that Jen and I have about an HR topic of the day. If you came here after our quick sip, today we are talking about organizational restructuring. And specifically for this longer form video, we're talking about how small businesses can lead a successful organizational restructure without losing people. So first things first, Jen, as a small business owner yourself and as someone who has built a business where we give strategic HR guidance to small business owners, what mindset does a small business leader need to head into as they decide to move into an organizational restructuring?
That's a really good question. I think mindset has a lot to do with the outcome of what happens during a restructuring. A couple things. One, begin with the end in mind. So restructuring projects are hard, and they start with a business case, and the business case is kind of like, if we're going to take part of the organization and lay off people or remove an entire part of the organization from the org chart of the people that come with it. It's understanding, what are you trying to achieve and why are you trying to achieve it, and make sure that that stays front of mind throughout the process, especially when the emotions start to get high. And I've yet to see a restructuring project where at some point we don't see the emotions start to flare. It's so hard to stay cool, calm, and collected through it all.
Mm-hmm. So that actually leads into a good question, because I definitely think that we have both worked with businesses who've undergone restructuring, and at times the emotions take over, right? Or business leaders start to try to address performance issues by including employees in the organizational restructuring, even though they don't really meet the business case for the restructure.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
Right. So what, so given your practical experience, the firm's practical experience with restructuring, what are some common mistakes leaders should try to avoid?
Yeah, okay. So I guess first let's start with the difference between, like, what is the organizational restructuring and what is a performance-related termination. Yep. You have like the classic performance-related termination. Someone is in a job role where they're not meeting the essential functions of the job. They could be a great person. They might do a great job in another position somewhere else, but they're not doing a good job in that role. And the company decides to initiate termination, right? Typically with a separation agreement, and that person goes off and they find another job somewhere else. Sometimes you'll have a few of those in rapid succession or related to a particular part of the organization where it's just not doing what it needs to do. Yep. An organizational restructuring is when you have a group, and it can be across departments or it can be a large geographical area if they're closing down a facility in a particular location. But the layoffs are not related to individual performance. They're either related to business underperformance for whatever reason, or just the strategic decision of management to do something different with the business in order to protect the long-term, typically protect the long-term viability of the business. So it's never something that's done with the idea of, oh, this is this wonderful opportunity. It's like, this is what we're doing to shore up the business and make sure that there is a business to continue to build going forward, right? I think mixing that whole performance-related and organizational-related thing in the same group of layoffs or reduction in force. We talk about RIFs a lot here, where we're doing layoffs where there's a certain percentage of the population that comes out. We don't mix the two. The messaging's not the same, the purpose isn't the same, the business case isn't the same. And I think particularly for organizational restructuring, everything starts with that business case. What are we trying to achieve? Why are we trying to do it? How are we going to communicate to both the people who are impacted and, really importantly, the people who stay with the organization after the restructuring?
Yeah, and I think as an outsourced HR partner, a lot of our role is when emotions do get high, when people start to panic or get confused, it's really redirecting them back to the business case. If all of a sudden a member of the team who wasn't going to be considered as part of the reorganization, suddenly their name kind of starts getting floated, there's the responsibility that we have to say, okay, let's talk about it, and how does that apply to the already established business case? Does this ultimately meet the end goal of what you're attempting to accomplish with the restructure?
Yeah, and I think when I was first learning how to do restructuring work 20-something years ago, I'm old, I was working with a guy, and we were working on a really big corporate restructuring, and he's like, I walk into every restructuring assuming that everyone who is currently on board is currently doing a great job. That's the going in position. They're all doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
So you've already handled all of your performance issues before we even get into restructuring. And if you go in with that mindset and be like, whatever the issues are that might be related to individual performance issues, those need to be dealt with before we go into the restructuring.
That's actually some really good practical advice,
Yeah.
and I think really just good general advice for any manager or business leader who is a bit nervous about giving performance feedback, because what happens if you find yourself in a reorganization project? That's not going to be the opportunity for you to address the performance issues.
Correct.
Now, obviously, not every employee is going to be impacted by a reorg, right? There's ultimately employees that businesses want to keep because it's actually essential to, like you said, shoring up the business. But obviously, employees are smart people, and maybe some of them are really intuitive, and they kind of start to get a vibe that maybe things are going to shift, or they're really intuitive to the finances of the business, so they realize that something isn't working.
The writing on the wall?
Yeah, the writing on the wall, to be kind of casual about it. What can HR do in conjunction with business leaders to avoid employee churn when employees start to get the sense that there's a reorganization
There's something
coming soon?
Yeah. So there's some stuff you can do. I think the overarching theme here is how are we creating and implementing the communication plan that goes alongside the restructuring. So there's the business case, which is what we're doing, why we're doing it. There's a work plan behind it. There's a financial analysis behind it. But then overarching all of that is who are you communicating to when, and what are you saying in what cadence? And how are you repeating those messages? And that communication plan often starts before you actually announce the restructuring.
Yep.
So there are messages that can be passed without giving away too much, because the other thing I'll say is over communicating. Can you really over communicate? I don't know. But giving too much detail too early can be risky, because oftentimes we'll see that in the nitty-gritty details of restructuring, things will change. Sometimes based out of the necessity of where the business is at, and sometimes they're able to say, oh, well, actually, maybe we can retain more people than we thought because we've got better forecasts. There's a lot of toing and froing in those design stages where people really do make the best effort to make the best decisions they can, and sometimes there's several iterations of that business case. The communication plan is all about getting in front of the bus, metaphorically, and figuring out, if our goal is to retain certain key people in the organization, how do we ensure that we're telling them that we are making mature decisions in a timely manner to protect the long-term viability of the business, and communicate either at a group level or individual level that we value people, that we see them, that we want them to be part of the future organization, without necessarily giving the details of, by the way, like we might be doing something, but I got your back, because you never know. But I think it's important to let people know that you see them, you value them, that you're continuing to work through some of the challenges in the organization, particularly for those businesses where it might be, people know that there's financial challenges. Like maybe last year there weren't bonuses. Maybe they see that there's a hiring freeze already, or they're not seeing projects come through that they thought for sure were coming through, right? It's giving them the information that allows them to be like, look, we're working through some challenges in the business. I want you to know that we really appreciate what you are doing here with us, and we value you and your contribution to the business. That kind of messaging is fine. I think overdoing it can create problems downstream.
Yeah, and I would also think, as much as you can never predict a restructure or a reorganization, there's something about the idea that if generally you are a transparent organization that really tries to keep its employees up to date on how the business is doing, setting clear goals, understanding how their performance impacts the business, when you actually have the conversation about the potentiality of a reorg, they're more open to it because it's just par for the course of honest, upfront communication.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of
but that assumes that you've already got the transparent communications in plan. You can't all of a sudden start being, if you've never talked about any of this before, and all of a sudden you walk into the cafeteria and be like, oh, by the way, we're thinking about this.
Then everyone's like, something's going up, right? Yeah, all of a sudden the CEO who sits in his office all day is all of a sudden going around to everyone's table and being like, hi, how you doing? What's your name? What do you do here?
So it's got to
good
be
to know.
consistent.
Yeah.
Like, we say in performance management, the best predictor of future performance is past performance, so keep it consistent.
Yeah.
I also think there's something about just, once the decision's made, don't sit on it too long.
Yep.
Right? Work through it and focus on the entire communication plan. I think there's something about what's happening during the implementation process, because sometimes it takes a little time. There's the notification, which is really the event, but there's stuff that happens just before and there's stuff that happens just after, and the communication is so critically important there. Particularly communication as it relates to, there's senior management that typically knows what's going on in some detail, but then also there might be managers and team leaders where we can bring them into the loop shortly before, but also really equip them with those communication skills for immediately after. That's so important.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think the expediency of it is really important, because there can definitely be leaders who, if it's a financial based decision, are like, oh, we're waiting on a windfall, we're waiting for funding, and then they put it off. They put it off until ultimately the benefit of time is not on their side, and from having 2 or 3 weeks to really put together the communication plan and deliver the message, they all of a sudden have to do all that in a day because the funding or the Hail Mary that they were hoping for didn't land. So I think that's that commitment from the beginning of this is the goal that we are trying to achieve is really important.
I had a conversation with a business owner at a completely separate event about a year ago, and he experienced exactly that. So he kept hoping for this, this big project to come over the line, and he was holding on to his team because they were great. I mean, he loved all of them.
Yeah.
And it was his CFO who came to him and he said, if you don't do layoffs now, you will have no money left to give packages to anyone.
Yep.
And that was a real reckoning where he's like, God, now I have to do something. So he ended up laying off a couple of people and was able to give them a severance package. But it was really tough because he really wanted to keep everybody. He loved them all.
Yeah. Now, obviously, in a perfect world, we get to be the proactive HR support for small business leaders. If we have not always the case, but that is our goal.
Yes.
But if there is a C-suite executive, a CEO, a CFO, a small business founder watching this video right now, and they're watching this because they think they may need to restructure their organization, what is the first thing they can do to protect people and culture?
Communication.
Okay.
First, I think figuring out, there's 2 sides of it. One, I think it's working with an HR partner to architect what the communication plan needs to look like, and that starts with how do we articulate to people with enough detail what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then figuring out how to message that, and then working through the analysis of what is the net impact on the business and what does it really need to look like.
Yep.
It is a very financially driven exercise, and I think it requires both HR and finance at the table, unless you happen to have someone who specializes in restructuring and they can work both ends of that. We used to say that the best job you can ever do in restructuring is just good enough. Because it is so challenging and it has such an impact on people. Protecting your people and your culture comes down to how well does the impacted person feel that they were valued and seen as an individual as they walk out of that room, so that even though they may have been on the wrong side of the restructuring, they still, like, if they can come back and feel like they can still have lunch with their colleagues the following week, that is a win.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we still really value what you have done for us up to now. Unfortunately, we can't continue for whatever reason, and this is the reason. And then for the people who are in the retained organization, the fact that they can still feel, we understand why this had to happen. We feel bad for our colleagues, but we still value them. I feel I'm still comfortable reaching out, maybe contacting them, helping them with my network. How can I help them land their next role? But more importantly, my company valued them enough that they were able to communicate effectively, so that I know that if anything like this ever happened to me in the future, I would be treated the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I still feel okay vis-a-vis my colleagues, even though they're no longer with us.
Yeah, I think there's something about delivering some of those tough messages while still, obviously treating both the impacted employees and the retained employees with dignity and respect. This is something we always talk about, but there is something about also, maintaining your employer brand so that the retained employees do feel comfortable remaining employed, and they ultimately saw kind of core values and dignity and respect in action.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really critically
And
important.
it's like these are people, I think we forget sometimes how much the workplace has replaced a lot of our social connections.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're like work friends,
Yeah.
there's still people you have lunch with every day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And some of us, we're in the same job, I'm here 10 years, right? You're
Yep.
here, we know each other.
Yep.
Because we're in and out, it's important that people still feel that, even though the employment relationship is ending, maybe that professional relationship doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And I think that can still be, I guess, a silver lining in what is otherwise a difficult message to pass.
Yeah, and I think that's also almost why clarity around the fact that it's a reorg and not performance-based is
Yeah.
also critically important, because when you start blurring the lines and it gets confusing,
It's hard to
people
keep the
start
message
to
straight.
question,
Yeah.
was this really a layoff or was this really performance-based?
It's the integrity of the messaging, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, great chat, Jen.
Yep.
Thanks
One of
so
my
much.
favorite topics.
Yeah, something where, as unfortunate it is, we are good at guiding companies
Yeah.
through, because it is a reality of running a small business.
Any business probably, but
Yeah. But we specialize in small businesses. Thanks so much for tuning into our coffee chat. If you like what we are putting out there, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share.
Yeah.
To your small business owner friends, your LinkedIn network, we definitely appreciate it. And we will be back soon with another quick sip and coffee chat. Thanks.
Thank you.